Welcome to another installment of Donning the Armor. This morning we will begin in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to all the congregation of the children of Israel, and say to them, You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." So now we're going to continue to get more rules, more regulations that the Israelites are to follow to be in right standing with God, for them to walk out the way he wishes them to be, and the way he wishes them to be separate from all the other nations around them. And he's saying, you need to be holy because I am holy. You need to be set apart from everything else in this world solely for me, because I am set apart from everything else in this world. I am a different way. This world is of wickedness. I am of a different way. You need to be set apart for me in that different way. Once again, what the Lord asks of us, and asked especially of these Israelites to live under the law, was not the easy path in life. It was the difficult path in life. They were playing it on the extreme difficult mode. This was their life, and it was unlike everyone else's, and it was very narrow. I know people have an issue with the idea. I was watching a video of a Methodist minister or a Lutheran minister speaking about how, although Jesus said he was the narrow path, that's not really what he meant, and that's being exclusionary, and that God is a wide road. But as we can read throughout the Old Testament, including especially Leviticus, God's way is not wide. It is incredibly narrow. It is rough. It is rocky. It is tough. But oftentimes, that narrow, tough, hard route is the most rewarding. Not one to be talking about health and fitness, considering I am neither. But the narrow route of getting in shape, it is very tough. It is very hard, but it's incredibly rewarding. And most people like myself take that wide, easy route of laziness and sloth. We can make whatever excuses we want, but we do. It's very difficult to find time. Some people still find the time. It's very difficult on my body. I have this issue, that issue. Lots of people have those issues. They still find a way. And maybe I should be ashamed to say it, but I'm not really ashamed to say it because it's just the truth. I'm just too lazy to get in shape. I have not set that apart from the laziness. I've conformed to the wide, easy way. But we're not to be lazy in our faith. We're to walk out that narrow, hard, tough path. So that way we can be holy for Him. Because the rewards, the riches that await us in eternity are worth the narrow path, are worth keeping ourselves separate from the wide, sinful, lazy, just weakness of the world. This just accepting of how things are. We want better than that. And that's how our walk should be. Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father and keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. You're to treat your mother and father correctly. which actually goes beyond the commandment to honor your mother and father, which means to honor them unto their old age, to care for them and not leave them hanging, and to help them as they helped raise you. You need to now care for them as they degrade. Here, you're to treat your mother and father well, because he placed them over us. He placed them over you. Your mother and father were placed over you by God. I was placed over my children by God to lead them in his way. And my failure to do that will be my own. I will have to stand before the Lord and give accounting for my failures as a father in the position he put me in. Do not turn to idols, nor make for yourselves molded gods. I am the Lord your God. You're going to go into the new land. You're going to see lots of this. Do not turn to them. And it means do not turn to worship in these things. I am the Lord your God. I am in your presence. You don't need a thing to look at. You don't need a focal point of your prayers. You don't need a little cross to pray to God. This doesn't focus your prayers. You don't need to hold it to feel close to him. He is close to you. Don't make symbols of even the Lord into an idol, because anything you place above God is an idol. If you offer a sacrifice of a peace offering to the Lord, you shall do it of your own free will. It shall be eaten the same day you offer it, and on the next day. And if any remains until the third day, it is to be burned in fire. It is to be eaten all on the if it is to be eaten at all on the third day, it is an abomination. It shall not be accepted. Therefore, anyone who eats of it shall bear his iniquity, because he has profaned the hallowed offering of the Lord. And that person shall be cut off from his people. If you're going to bring a peace offering before the Lord to seek communion with him, it needs to be a free will. You need to want to bring it. He wants us to come to him of our own free will. He loves us. He wants us to love him. You cannot force a person to love. Then that is not love. That is control. And God has the sovereignty to control us. But what would be the point if he's desirous and perfect in love? Now, this is an idea that if it's to be sitting out for 3 days, now it's unclean. You can't leave food sitting out in a desert for 3 days. The next day even seems a little extra to me. But 3 days, definitely not. And if you're doing that, it's an abomination, and now your peace offering will no longer be acceptable. It is now going to be profaned. You have gone against what God asked for, and now that person needs to be cut off and put out of the camp, because they're not honoring the Lord, and they're not taking the offering to him seriously. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest, and you shall not glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather every grape of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God. You need to leave things for those traveling through the land, and you need to leave it there for the poor. We are to love our neighbors as ourselves. That includes the stranger. That includes the poor among us. That we are to care for them. And this is the way with which it was done often. That they were to allow certain portions of their vineyards and their crops to stay out for people to pick it up and eat of it themselves, because that might be all they have. We see this in the book of Ruth, where they don't have anything. Their husbands have died. She's returned to the land with her mother-in-law, and now Ruth is going out to glean from the crops, to pick up the droppings that have fallen out of the wheat sleeves so that she can bring them back and they can grind it in the flour and they can bake bread of their own so they can eat. The Lord leaves provision for even the lowest among us. No one is cut off from the Lord because of wealth and material gain. He blesses us all in abundance, even if he blesses us in different ways. He may bless the one with owning the land and this wealth of gathering in a harvest. He will bless another by allowing that person to work the harvest and be able to afford and provide for their family. And he blesses the lowest among us by allowing us to glean the droppings, the cast off, the fallen wheat from the ground, so we are still provided for. There's no equity of blessing, but there's an abundance of it. There's not a uniformity as much as there is a unity in the bride of Christ, in the children of God. You shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. You shall not swear by my name falsely, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Do not cheat, do not steal, do not lie, and do not swear and make oaths by the name of the Lord falsely. Unfortunately, we see all of these things far too often, including people swearing by the Lord's name falsely. We see people who deny Christ swearing by the name of Christ to get in a position or to move ahead or to carve out a niche for them. You look at social media, you will look at a lot of right-wing people more than left-wing, because a lot of them pull away from God, just generally. But you do see it there too, where they will say, well, as a Christian, I believe in all of that. We can affirm all of this stuff that God calls abominable. I believe that Jesus would be for all these things that he never said he was for, and his entire gospel goes against. But you also have a lot of right-wing people who will say, I'm a Christian, and then they will use it to empty and hollow out the Lord's name by then just speaking about things that are full of hatred for one's neighbor. Hatred for oftentimes the teachings of Christ. I saw a right-wing commentator not that long ago preaching against somebody's salvation because they didn't deserve it, because of the way they had previously lived their lives, because they're denying that Christ can make someone new. And then when a believer quoted out the prodigal son parable to them, this commentator said that they hated that parable because it taught people the wrong lesson. You can't swear by the name of Christ and then say you hate his teachings and have that oath of placing yourself under Christ's authority be true. You have sworn by his name falsely in that instance, because you are not turning your heart to walking out his teachings if you say you hate them. You shall not cheat your neighbor, nor rob him. The wages of him who is hired shall not remain with you all night until morning. You shall not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block before the blind, but shall fear your God. I am the Lord. Don't cheat your neighbor. Don't rob him. The wages of him who is hired shall not remain with you all night until morning. You hired him to do a job. Night has come. It's time for him to go home. You pay the man. You know, nowadays in our culture, we get paid every week, every 2 weeks. We don't get paid every day. But in that economy, you got paid every day. You're not to hold on to it until he comes back in the next morning. You're to pay him when he leaves. Because that is seen as cheating them of their wages that they earned. Verse 14 is just, why? Why does this even need to be said? You shall not curse to death. Because you're basically just because you're saying something about someone who can't hear you doesn't mean you aren't saying it, is the idea. Don't place a stumbling block before the blind. Don't put something in someone's way just because no one sees you do it. You shall fear your God. Because even if no one hears you cursing, just because you're rumor mongering and cursing someone who cannot hear you in the moment, not just somebody who cannot hear, period, but somebody who is not in the hearing of you. They're not there. You're speaking behind their back. Just because they can't hear you doesn't mean God doesn't hear you. Don't place stumbling blocks before people, even though they don't see that you're the one doing it. Don't trip people up. Because even though no one sees you doing it, God sees you doing it. And you should fear standing righteously before him. Because ultimately, he is going to be the one that judges you. You shall do no injustice in judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty. In righteousness you shall judge your neighbor. You shall not go about as a talebearer among your people, nor shall you take a stand against the life of your neighbor. I am the Lord. When you're judging people, you're not giving partiality to somebody because you view them as the oppressed. You're not going to honor somebody because they hold a high status. You're going to do your imperfect best at being an impartial judge as the Lord is. The Lord does not judge based on who we are. He judges solely and perfectly along the letter of the law. We want to live in the law, he will judge us by the law. And the wages of all and any sin are death. We want to live by the covenant of grace, he will judge us by the covenant of grace. By the righteousness we are cloaked in. No impartiality. He will judge us as we choose to be judged in life. It's something that I didn't realize earlier, even in my Christian walk. That we get to choose before him whether or not we want to be judged in Christ, under the covenant of grace, or we want to be judged per the law. And advice, you don't want to be judged by the law because you cannot keep it. But then he also goes on to say, don't be rumor mongering, don't be a talebearer. And certainly do not take a stand against the life of your neighbor. Don't bear false witness in a trial where your neighbor's life is on the line. You're not going to bear false witness in that instance. You are going to be honest because someone's life is dependent upon your honesty. And once again, because I am the Lord and I will know. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him. Don't hate people. You're not going to bear hate. But if you catch your neighbor, your brother in a way, if you catch these people living in sin, yes, you shall rebuke them. That's not sinful. Hatred towards somebody you're supposed to love is sinful because that can be reconciled. That can be spoken of. You can come to an agreement. Even if that agreement is that we don't see eye to eye. But if someone's living in sin, you should rebuke them for it. And you're not going to be living in sin because of that, because that's what you were told to do. You shall not take vengeance nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord your God. You're not taking the vengeance. Vengeance is God's, and God's alone. That is his sovereign will. We are not to usurp that of our own. You shall keep my statutes. You shall not let your livestock breed with another kind. You shall not sow your field with mixed seed, nor shall you a garment of mixed linen and wool come upon you. People will bring this up a lot, like, oh, well, you keep the law. Do you wear mixed fabrics? Well, we don't keep the law. There are some even versions of Christianity that do try to keep the law, and their keeping the law is very subjective and very poor, because they do not keep all of these laws even remotely close. They just use it as a way of trying to elevate and almost puff themselves up with pride in their ability to follow some laws of God. But this is a way of him illustrating to them that you are not to be mixing your holiness with the sinfulness of the paganism around you. Do not mix. Keep yourself solely for me, set apart only for me. And by wearing only one kind of garment, you're going to be representing that outside to everyone else as well. That you are unwilling to mix and mingle. Whoever lies carnally with a woman who is betrothed to a man is a concubine, and who has not at all been redeemed nor given her freedom. For this there shall be scourging, but they shall not be put to death, because she was not free. So if someone, and this was covered before, I think even in Exodus, that sometimes people would buy a bondwoman to become a wife, to become a concubine. Now, if a man lies with that woman who is in that time of betrothal, that betrothal period, that engagement period, and that woman hadn't been redeemed, she hasn't been given her freedom from this engagement to be a free woman, then they're not going to be put to death because she wasn't free. Normally, adultery, both the man and the woman, they're stoned to death. This says there will be a scourging. Now, this scourging, we don't know what it means in Leviticus, but throughout Israel's history, scourging would normally be 40 lashes, not the scourging Jesus got. The Roman scourging was a completely different beast. That was meant most of the time to dismember and kill. The scourging Jesus got was wholly different. This scourging would be 39 lashes plus one, which they would use a whip, a cat o' nine tails often, but they would whip the person 39 lashes, and then they would lay on one gentle lash as a sign of grace and mercy as offered by the Lord. So it was not the same kind of scourging that the Romans did, but it was not something you wanted to have done either way. And he shall bring his trespass offering to the Lord to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, a ram as a trespass offering. The priest shall make atonement for him with the ram of the trespass offering before the Lord for his sin which he has committed, and the sin which he has committed shall be forgiven him. Now, lots of times people will be like, well, this is all he had to do for raping that woman? Nowhere in that did it say rape. Nowhere. That's something people are placing into it. I'm not saying it doesn't also encompass that. I have no idea. But that's not what it's saying. It's saying as if these two people chose to do this act, which most adultery is. Two people choosing an act, that's what makes it adultery. If she was not a free woman, it's a scourging and not a death sentence. Anything else you're adding into it, you're adding into it, not God adding it there. When you come into the land and have planted all kinds of trees for food, then you shall count their fruit as uncircumcised. 3 years it shall be as uncircumcised to you, it shall not be eaten. But in the 4th year all its fruit shall be holy, a praise to the Lord. And in the 5th year you may eat its fruit, that it may yield to you its increase. I am the Lord your God. So he's saying, this land is so defiled that I'm sending you to, that it is vomited out its inhabitants. So when you begin to plant all kinds of fruit trees for food, for the first 3 years, it's unclean, it's unkosher, uncircumcised. It is not part of something you should be eating. It is still acting as defiled for the first 3 years that it's giving off fruit. The 4th year shall be the first fruits as offered to the Lord, basically. It'll be holy. It'll be a praise to the Lord. You won't eat it in that 4th year. In the 5th year, now you will treat it as if it's any other clean fruit tree that you can now eat of as your own. And in a way, that takes a lot of patience and a lot of faith and obedience to the Lord to follow this through. You shall not eat anything with blood, nor shall you practice divination or soothsaying. You shall not. All right, let's just 26 first. So we've already covered the blood is precious. You do not eat anything with the blood. But he also says you should not practice divination or soothsaying. You're not a psychic medium. You're not trying to tell the future. You're not looking into the sky and trying to tell from the stars. Anything that is revealed to you will come from me. If I want to reveal something to you, it'll come from me. You're not to do these things because the mediums, oftentimes they were contacting, if they were even serious and not just con men, they would be contacting demons and getting information from demons. Not something you want to be dealing with. Best to just stay away from that because you're either dealing in the demonic or you're dealing with a con man and having your money ripped off. Most of the time in the world we live in, they're con men. They've uncovered these people. Lots of times when these big psychics go into a new city or town, what they'll do is they'll actually send in an advanced scout team months ahead of time, often, 2-3 months ahead of time, to ingrain themselves in the city, talking to people, asking about things, asking who's going to go to this guy's show when he comes to their town. And they gather all these people's personal information, basically, give it to the psychic and his team, who is then able to tell, hey, that's Mary. Her mother died last year. Her mother's name was Agnes. Hey, I can hear from your mother, Agnes. People are that sick, by the way, because they're wicked. I mean, why not? Plus, there's money to be made, and they worship money over God. You shall not shave around the sides of your head, nor shall you disfigure the edges of your beard. You shall not make any cutting in your flesh for the dead, nor tattoo any marks on you. I am the Lord your God. Look, I can't stand tattoos. I think they're hideous. I've never seen a tattoo that looked good. I can't stand them. But this does not actually have anything to do about getting tattooed. As it's a continuation, that's a comma. Doesn't say no tattoos for you. What it says is even the shaving and the disfigurement of the beard, these are things that the pagans would do in their customary mourning periods. They would get tattoos, which we sometimes do in our thing, and we probably shouldn't. But you get tattooed. You got cuttings in your flesh. You would get brandings. You would shave your head a certain way. You would disfigure your beard. These are the things that the pagans would do, and God is saying you are to be separate from these people. You are to be separate from these pagans. Do not do as they do. This is not for you. And seems like a pretty obvious one, but 29, but they were going to a land full of abject wickedness. Do not prostitute your daughter, or cause her to be a harlot, lest the land fall into harlotry, and the land become full of wickedness. Seems pretty self-explanatory, that one. You shall keep my Sabbaths and revere my sanctuary. I am the Lord. I am the Lord. So, everything I have told you to do about the Sabbath, you're going to keep them. You're going to keep them as I told you. And you're going to revere my sanctuary. You're going to revere the fact that I tabernacle among you. Because I am separate from all things. I am the Lord. Nothing else is going to be in your life as I am. Give no regard to mediums or familiar spirits. Do not seek after them to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. So, no mediums. You're not trying to contact the dead. You're not trying to speak to your dead ancestors. Do not seek after them because you will be defiled by them. And much like the Garden of Eden discussion where people say, well, God just didn't want you to have knowledge. No, he didn't want them to understand the wickedness that could exist in a perfect world. And in this case, he's saying, don't try to. They will defile you. Because most likely, that familiar spirit is not going to be what you're contacting. That's going to be a demon. And it's going to defile you. You shall rise before the gray-headed and honor the presence of an old man and fear your God. I am the Lord. Respect your elders. You're going to show deference and respect to your elders. And if a stranger dwells with you in your land, you shall not mistreat him. The stranger who dwells among you shall be to you as one born among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you are strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. You know what it was like to be a stranger. You know what it is like to be mistreated in a land where you are a stranger. So love the stranger among you. Comes with kind of a caveat of as long as they're doing as they're told, otherwise you cast them out, but you're not mistreating them. And you're going to do it because I brought you out of Egypt and showed you a better way. You shall do no injustice in judgment, in measurement of length, weight, or volume. You shall have honest scales, honest weights, an honest ephah, an honest hin. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe all my statutes and all my judgments and perform them. I am the Lord. Do not be dishonest in business. Do not be dishonest in the way you interact with each other, because that can only bring ill. Now, moving on to chapter 20. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Again you shall say to the children of Israel, whoever of the children of Israel or of the strangers who dwell in Israel, who gives any of his descendants to Moloch, he shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. I will set my face against that man, and I will cut him off from his people, because he has given some of his descendants to Moloch to defile my sanctuary and profane my holy name. And if the people of the land should in any way hide their eyes from the man, when he gives some of his descendants to Moloch, and they do not kill him, I will set my face against that man and against his family, and I will cut him off from his people, and all who prostitute themselves with him to commit harlotry with Moloch. You're going to go into a land of abject wickedness where people are sacrificing their children to this god, literally putting their babies in the hands of a burning metal statue to kill it, to sacrifice for whatever stupid reason they could think of that they would burn their own child. That person, they do it, he is to be stoned to death. If anybody said, you know what, I really like that guy, he's my brother, and you ignore the fact he did that, now you are going to have God against you. You have now brought God's wrath upon you, and they will also be cut off. Because anybody who even allows a foothold of this idol worship, this harlotry, they will be cut off permanently from my people. And the person turns to mediums and familiar spirits to prostitute himself with them. I will set my face against that person and cut him off from his people. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be holy, for I am the Lord your God. and you shall keep my statutes and perform them. I am the Lord who sanctifies you. We've already covered this. You are to be set apart, consecrated for God and for God alone. Not for these false idols, not for these mediums, not for these demonic false gods that the pagans would worship. For everyone who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. He has cursed his father or his mother, his blood shall be upon him. It's not so much cursing as in like curse words and swear words. It's not that. It's that pronouncing curses upon your father. Like, how dare you, Father? May you be struck sick with leprosy for what you said to me. That kind of curse. Then you're going to be put to death because you are not revering nor honoring your parents. The man who commits adultery with another man's wife, he who commits adultery with his neighbor's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. So here we saw this with the woman being brought before Jesus, and they're asking, what should she be done? The law of Moses says she's to be stoned. Well, actually, it said that the man and the woman were to be stoned. They're saying this woman was caught in the act. Jesus leans down to write something in the dirt. We don't know what he wrote. He very well may have written down those people's sins. That's why they turned away. And also could have easily wrote something as simple as, then where is the man? Or the man's name, where is such and such? Because it shows that they are not keeping the law themselves by withholding the man for the stoning as well. They are acting in falsehood and taking God's law in vain, making it empty by not adjudicating it equally and playing favorites for the man over the woman. The man who lies with his father's wife has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. So here we come across a lot of things that are death sentences and things that we've already covered in previous chapters. Do not lie with your father's wife because that's his wife. You are uncovering even his nakedness even as much as you are hers. If a man lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have committed perversion. Their blood shall be upon them. If a man lies with a male as he lies with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. If a man marries a woman and her mother, it is wickedness. They shall be burned with fire. Both he and they, that there may be no wickedness among you. So some of them are just being put to death normally by stoning. This specifically saying if you marry a woman and her mother to have this degenerate sexual threesome, you are to be burnt to death. To have it completely purged out from among the people. If a man mates with an animal, he shall surely be put to death, and you shall kill the animal. If a woman approaches an animal and mates with it, you shall kill the woman and the animal. They shall be put to death. Their blood is upon them. If a man takes his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and he sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is a wicked thing. They shall be cut off from the sight of their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness. He shall bear his guilt. If a man lies with a woman during her sickness and uncovers her nakedness, he has exposed her flow, and she has uncovered the flow of her blood. Both of them shall be cut off from their people. These are all things where before in the previous chapter we were saying these are things that are wicked, don't do them. Now it's telling us the punishment for having done these things. Originally, God is telling the people through Moses, do not do this stuff. Now he's going, this is the punishment for these things when you do them. If somebody wants to do them, now you know the punishment. This is what is to be done. And it is incredibly harsh. Death sentences, exiles. And it's all because these people have fallen into the wickedness of the world and need to be put away before the leaven of their sin rises throughout the entire people. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister nor your father's sister, for that would uncover his near kin. they shall bear their guilt. If a man lies with his uncle's wife, he has uncovered his uncle's nakedness. They shall bear their sin. They shall die childless. If a man takes his brother's wife, it is unclean, is an unclean thing. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall be childless. This kind of seems as though, when I was looking at it, not just to be no child will come from this, they won't have offspring, but the children they do have will be removed from their custody because they are not fit to raise the children of God. You shall therefore keep all my statutes, all my judgments, and perform them, that the land where I am bringing you to dwell may not vomit you out. You shall not walk in the statutes of the nation which I am casting out before you, for they commit all these things, and therefore I abhor them. But I have said to you, you shall inherit their land, and I will give it to you to possess, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am the Lord your God, who has separated you from the peoples. You shall therefore distinguish between clean animals and unclean, between unclean birds and clean. You shall not make yourselves abominable by beast, or by bird, or by any kind of living thing that creeps on the ground, which I have separated from you as unclean. And you shall be holy to me, for I, the Lord, am holy, and have separated you from the peoples, that you shall be mine. A man or a woman who is a medium, or who has familiar spirits, shall be put to death. They shall stone them with stones, their blood shall be upon them. So there's a list of long and gnarly punishments, but it is one to keep people holy, to keep them separate from God. People don't like to hear about the punishment that their sin brings upon them. But that isn't even the worst punishment that sin brings. It is an eternal separation from God. See, we can be killed here in any number of ways because mankind is an incredibly fragile creature. Our lives can end here because God has decided it's our time. We could die of natural causes. We can die in our sleep. We can die in a car crash. Whenever he chooses to take us home, because it is his to give and take. Life is his to give and take. If he chooses to take it, it is his to take, and he will do with it what he will. But when that time of judgment comes, that is when the consequences and debt of sin matter most, because these people might be getting stoned for being abominable and being abominations before the Lord, but that physical death and pain they're going to suffer in those moments is nothing compared to the eternal separation of God that is to follow. See, the Lord keeps saying, I am the Lord your God. And we used to say as Christians, we are God-fearing people. And that kind of got taken away because that made God sound mean. And we don't want God to sound mean. We want him to be love. God is love. God is perfect love, perfect justice, and perfectly sovereign, which means although he loves us perfectly and has given us this opportunity to reconcile with him, to pull us from our wickedness and to rejoin him in eternity, he is perfectly just and must punish all sin equally, showing partiality to no one, regardless of who they were or what they did. No works can outweigh sin and its debt and the wages of it. And because he is eternally sovereign, he is the one who gets to make those judgments. That's why he is to be feared. Because though someone can take our lives here, they can't touch us in eternity. The Lord, however, is the one we will stand before. And we should be fearful of standing before him without being cloaked in the righteousness of Christ. Because there's no second chance. You have this one life to understand and reconcile yourself with the Lord through Jesus Christ. We've already gone over and past about ways people can be reconciled without Christ. And it's not really a without Christ as much as it is when you have never heard the name of Christ, that you are reconciled by your understanding of the sovereign creator God, as the people were before Christ came into the world. But those of us living in any part of this civilized planet, we have heard of Christ. We have heard of his sacrifice. We have heard of his narrow path of atonement. And that is what we should fear, standing before God without being cloaked in the righteousness that comes from that acceptance. That is our only path to God. The harshness, the harsh reality that the Israelites had to face because of their wickedness is nothing compared to the eternity they will have to face separate from him. All right, that's where we will end it for this morning. I hope this was profitable for you. I hope to see you next time. But until then, be blessed.